I'm from San Diego, Chula Vista, as a matter of fact. Born and raised there, and then when I was in high school in the 10th grade, I was in the high school band as well as other things. A couple of the guys, I think they were trombone players, as I remember, came into school one day and said, "Hey, we joined the Marine Corps Reserve Band last night, and they play every Wednesday. And if you join the band, you get $32 every couple of months," which is pretty big money when you're in high school back in the 40s. And so they got a couple of us interested, and we joined the Marine Corps Reserve Band. Well, at the time, when you're in high school, you don't really think of joining the Marine Corps. You think of, hey, I just joined the Marine Corps Reserve Band. But later on, I found out after the Korean War broke out that I had joined the Marine Corps. And that was great, because I love the Marine Corps. Anyway, we got called to active duty in 1950 after the Korean War broke out in June of '50, and reported to Marine Corps Recruit Depot here in San Diego. And shortly after, we were sent up to Camp Pendleton to be reassigned either in the infantry or to stay in the 11th Tank Battalion, which is part of the force here at MCRD. So we had to make a decision whether to stay in the tanks, the 11th Tank Battalion, or to switch over to the infantry. Of course, when you're 18 years old, you listen to older guys. We always called him the older guy. He was about 26 or 7. And he says, "Hey, you guys, have you ever see those war movies where Patton's tanks would hit the German tanks and they would blow up and everybody was killed in the tank? I don't think I want to ride in a tank. I think I'd rather take my chances out on the open ground where I'm on my own." So he convinced most of us to switch over to the infantry. Well, I'll cut to Korea real quickly and to say that when we were in the reservoir, I remember some tanks coming down the road ahead of us, passing us in the other direction. And here's Charlie. He's the guy that talked us into switching over to the infantry division. Here he is in the tank. Nice, warm, toasty guy, smoking a cigar, and very comfortable. And here we were freezing our balls off out there, out in the minus 20-degree temperature. So I'll never forget old Charlie. He really pulled a shenanigan on us, if you want to call it that. Anyway, up at Camp Pendleton, we were, as I remember, our daily routine was the rifle range, 2 to 3 hours every day. And I remember I got a sharpshooter medal for that. And the rest of the time was running up and down the hills up there, getting toughened up. Starting at Camp Pendleton, we were issued a M1 rifle, most of us. It seems like all the big guys, which was the M1 was the standard weapon of the Corps. We also had what was called a BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle, which was like a machine gun. It seems like they always would assign the smallest guy, the shortest guy, the skinniest guy with a BAR, which was heavier than an M1. I never could figure that out, but that's the way it worked. So weapon-wise, that's what we were trained for in Camp Pendleton, of course, then later on in Japan. Well, and around September, as I remember, we left Pendleton and were shipped down to San Diego, trucked down there, and I shipped out of San Diego on the USS Walker troop ship. I had a full backpack, and I think I had a rifle. I had my rifle there. So when we left Pendleton, we were ready to go, ready to fight. Got on the USS Walker troop ship, which was a big troop ship that we all sailed across the Pacific on to Tokyo, Yokohama, as a matter of fact. I think it took about 13 days to get there. We pulled into Yokohama and we took a train to a beautiful town called Kyoto, which is pretty much in the middle of Japan. Yeah, I think it's called the Flower City, if I recall right. And the camp up there that we were assigned to was called Camp Otsu, which was an old naval officers camp that, of course, was deserted. in 1950, 5 years after World War II was over. So I think we were there around a week, maybe 10 days for advanced combat training. And then we were shipped down to Osaka and a camp down there called Camp Sakai. And we were there about a week or 10 days. But our next move was, and this was the first replacement draft. I guess I didn't mention that we all made up, we were all part of. Shipped down to Kobe, or Kobe as they call it now, and boarded a ship called the Aiken Victory, which was an old victory ship, Kaiser victory ship, I think, that was built in World War II. And we sailed over to Wonsan Harbor in North Korea and landed there. An interesting story that happened on the ship. I pulled scullery duty, which means I had to get up at 5 in the morning with 5 or 6 other guys and prepare breakfast for everybody and set the tables and so forth. Well, first thing that happened in the morning is that we all sat down at the chow table, and as I remember, they had oatmeal that day, the main course. So I had oatmeal and a cup of coffee. Well, some Weisenheimer, instead of putting sugar in the sugar bowl, he put salt in the sugar bowl. And so when we thought with sugar we were sprinkling on our oatmeal and on our coffee, it was actually salt. So I took a big swallow of oatmeal, and of course I tasted the salt and I spit it out. And without thinking, I grabbed my coffee and took a big slug of coffee, and that was even worse. So I don't know who the Weisenheimer was, but he got us. But we fixed the problem by putting the sugar in the sugar bowl after that. After we landed at Wonsan, we were trucked up, because the 1st Division, which had been in Korea a couple months, and after landing at Incheon and sort of turning the war around, which was down in South Korea by Seoul, the division sailed around to Wonsan a few weeks before we arrived, and then they fought their way up to the Chosin Reservoir, which was almost up to the Manchurian border, which is the border between North Korea and Manchuria, where MiG was back in when our fighters were fighting the MiGs in the air war. Anyway, the division was up at the reservoir at the time we landed, as I said before, in Wonsan. We joined them up there a few days later. I was assigned to the 7th Regiment, the famous 7th Regiment, 1st Battalion, and at a little place called Coterie, which was a little village at the reservoir. And I guess the first thing I remember about that, the following day after being assigned to the 7th, our platoon was walking by this village, which consisted of 5 or 6 huts along the left. And nobody was there except the very last hut. And there was a woman, young woman, standing in the doorway of this hut. And she had a dress on, past her knees, and I remember her legs were sort of spread, and our platoon got aside this hut where she was, and all of a sudden a machine gun opened up. There was a Gook machine gunner aiming at our platoon, of course, and shot us between her through her skirt. Well, of course, she didn't last more than a couple of milliseconds, and she went down. But unfortunately, a couple of our guys got hit and seriously wounded and died. So that's my first recollection of actual combat, you might say. After being there for a few days, the weather became brutally cold. And what I mean by brutally cold, I'm talking about down in 20 below zero, 30 below zero. And when you're in a foxhole and you're not really, well, you're in a sleeping bag at night, of course, but that's it. And we couldn't zip our sleeping bags up because